Hello, Taylor Elwood here, and today I am going to be talking about corporate magic. Um, no one asked questions this time in the group, so fair enough. I know it was a topic that was of interest to some people, but maybe they just want to, maybe y'all just want to hear my thoughts on this. So I'm going to go into it, and we'll go from there. So my thinking is that when most people think of corporate magic or think of corporations, they think of white collar jobs. Someone wearing a suit and working in a cubicle and all that fun stuff. And that's certainly true. But I don't. I think that's a very limited notion of of what a corporation is. Realistically, anytime you work at a job, you're working for a corporation. You might not dress up in a suit. You might not work in a cubicle. You might not be doing white collar work. It doesn't mean that you're not working for a corporation. When if you work at a convenience store, for example, you still have a uniform that you ideally are supposed to wear, which has the logo of the company, and you're representing that company. If you work as an electrician or a plumber for someone else, you're working in a corporate environment of sorts. It may be blue collar corporate work, but you're still there representing that company and you're doing specific work. Um, and then, of course, there is the classic, I'm going to go into the office today and work in a cubicle, which is what I do most days right now, at least for the short term. I go into my job and I work. I have a cubicle office space and I take phone calls and all day long and help people with their software. Fun times. But again, it differs. You could be doing programming, writing, whatever it is. Point though is that really any corporate magic that you're looking at is really defined more so by not by the specific office space you work in, but by the fact that you're working at a job. You work for someone else, and you're working in this environment in order to help that someone or that company make money. Um, so so with that in mind, I think when we make that distinction about what corporate magic is or isn't, it kind of helps us to look at what we can do then. And the way that I look at it is that your office space is kind of similar. Your office space is wherever you happen to be. Now, for me, it's a cubicle, but for you, if let's say you're working, you're an electrician, who has to drive to different sites. Your office is your truck, essentially. That's where you keep your gear. It's where you're going to spend a good amount of the time when you're not working on the job, but getting to and from the job. Um, you know, so it's a pretty important space. And then, if it's the same thing at a convenience store, for example, or a restaurant or whatever. Your space is going to be the space that you're in, that you're working in. Knowing that, I think that one of the things that can really be helpful for any magician who is in a situation where they're working for someone else is this understanding that because the space that you're in is a corporate space, whether you're a waiter or an electrician or whatever else, what you can do is you can approach that work from a very different headspace, one that's really geared more toward how to take that space and turn it into something that is advantageous for you. One of the ways that I like to do that is I like to work with the spirit of a company. So, for example, way back when, long ago, when I worked at Boeing, I worked with the spirit of Boeing as a company. And I also worked with the project that I had created, or that I was involved in. Actually, I didn't create it, but it was this project where we were creating. I was creating documentation about wiring on the plane and a program um, for it. And what I did is I took the name of that project and I turned it into a magical entity, or maybe I connected with the magical entity, the spirit of that project. I mean, you could look at it one of two ways. Either way, I did that, and at the time I did it because I was trying to help myself become better at a skill, in this case technical writing. And so I think that like when we look at corporate magic, we have to look at it in terms of a few different functions. One is get better at a skill. You were hired to do something, get better at it. And why not stack the deck in your favors and use some magical work for that purposes? The other is setting up an environment where, your work stands out, and your boss likes you and they get to know you, and they are actively helping you with your career. And at the same time, it creates this relationship where they're really never on your case. I like that one myself. And then the third, of course, is that you might be doing corporate magic as a way to help the business in and of itself. I mean, maybe you really like where you work at. Maybe you believe in the values and everything else, and so you want to help that corporation succeed. That would be another reason to do corporate magic. So when you keep in mind that you have these three reasons, right? One being that you're doing it to improve your work skills. Two being that you're doing it to set up an environment where you're appreciated and respected and everything else. And three, that you're doing it to help the company in some form or another. Then you realize that really that's essentially what corporate magic is about. I mean, there may be some other reasons people would do corporate magic, but I'm going to go with those as kind of the overlying ones. And if you have other ones that you would suggest, feel free to comment, in the video, because I always am open to other perspectives. So with that in mind, I've kind of already shared like how the first one works. Let's say you have a skill that you want to get better at. Like in my case, it was technical writing a long time ago. Right now, it's been a skill of problem solving around a specific software that I support. Either way, what I'm doing is I am working, like in the case of at Boeing, I was working with the spirit of the project. In the case of the software company I'm working at now, I'm working with the spirit of the software. And I know some people might say, well, aren't you, I mean, does software really have a spirit? And it's like, well, think about it this way. People are working with this program every single day. They have problems with it. They have frustrations with it. They talk about it as if it's a living spirit. And for all intents and purposes, it is. It has its own presence in their lives. It defines their lives. So why wouldn't it be a spirit? And why couldn't you work with that spirit? So for me, that's kind of my approach to it, is that I am working with that spirit. I am creating a presence with that spirit that's allowing me to essentially connect with and understand what that spirit wants. And it's allowing me to improve my skills. And so like in the case of Boeing, I went from not really being good at technical writing to pretty much getting the necessary skills I needed almost overnight, which improved my relationship with my boss immensely at the time. And in the other case, like in this case, answering phones, it's this experience where I am delving into the spirit itself and finding out how best to solve it using the spirit's aid. For a second approach, creating an environment in your workplace where essentially, your boss likes you and supports you and everything else. I mean, that's kind of another approach. Again, I've taken that approach as a defensive mechanism at times, sometimes as a proactive one. It just depends on the boss. If you have a boss that's really micromanager, and they're really always in your business and everything else, this can be a good way to get that person to ease off and cool down a little bit, because then you're essentially kind of creating this glamour, if you will, that you know what you're doing. And of course you ideally do know what you're doing, but a little bit of job magic never hurts. In such a case, like I had a boss at a business where he was really uptight and micromanagerial. What I ended up doing is I essentially created some energy pillows in his office to kind of help him be less adversarial, and at the same time, and to basically soften him up a bit. And then what I also did is, of course, I focused on getting better at the job, but I also did some magical work around just creating a workflow optimization, which helped out a lot, because then, within like a month or two after, boss had gotten upset with me at one point, and a month or so afterwards, I got that all sorted out. Everything became A-okay. I learned a lot from that experience, really. And what it really came right down to is you need to anticipate, you know, like what your boss is going to be like to some degree, and, you know, help them become better, at least with you. And if they become better with other people, then great. The third approach is, you know, helping the business overall. And I mean, again, this kind of comes down to like, if you really care about the product, you care about the company, everything else, that's why you're doing that work. For me, that like at the current job that I'm at, I do like my workplace overall. It's a good place to be. I like the people I work with. And one of the things that I've really tried to do is create it's kind of a combination of all three approaches. I've created a system for my own workflow, in terms of how I engage with customers, in terms of how I get the work done, in terms of how I solve problems, and how I engage with everyone else around me. In terms of like even creating an environment of sorts, which is very comforting and calm and peaceful. That's why I do my Qigong exercises in the morning before I really start working, because it helps to create this space where everything is just calm, relaxed, and peaceful. And so that's something that I recommend as well, because that can be a really useful way to help yourself create that kind of an environment. And at the same time, you know, my goal is to help the business thrive, because as long as I need a job, I need that business to do well. And so, you know, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that being the reason why you want a business to succeed. If you like the job that you're at, and you know you want it to succeed, or maybe you just need the job to succeed, you know, you want the business to succeed. So why not do some work around your workflow and around making things, you know, kind of come together as best they can. One of the things that I do is I've actually created a very specific environment in my cubicle space, where I've got a couple of statues, which perform different purposes, different functions. One is designed to help me get help from other people that have answers. It's kind of like a networker. And so he just attracts the attention of relevant people, and that helps me get problem solved quicker as needed. But he also inspires ideas for me. He kind of draws on that network knowledge, and then he plants that information for me. So, you know, there are times where I'm working on a thing, and I, you know, he reminds me of something or whatever else. He's kind of like a combination of a networker archivist. And then the other one is actually Lord Ganesh. And it seems appropriate with this particular job anyway, because Lord Ganesh is both the remover of obstacles and the god of obstacles. And when I think about it, when I'm working with you know, people on their software, I mean, they're having an obstacle with that software. They're feeling frustration. They need to do certain things. Well, what does Ganesh do? He removes those obstacles. He helps me find them and solve them and get them removed. And, you know, at the same time, kind of helps to keep the environment chill and relaxed. Make sure that the customers aren't getting too snippy or upset or anything else, because we don't really want that. We want things to be happy. At least I want things to be happy. I want, you know, it just makes my job easier. So, you know, and then I have like a ninja statue, which is actually really kind of just, again, designed along the lines of helping me come up with some unconventional ways of solving things. I mean, this is really what corporate magic is about. It's about taking your work and using it to define the magical processes that you're going to create in order to optimize that work and make things easier for you. All right, so that's really it for this video. It's a short one this time around, but I just wanted to share it with you guys. And thanks for watching, and take care.